Hello everyone, and welcome to the final entry in our OBS Utils beginner series. Today we're going to go over the final feature that is suitable for beginners of the module to kind of experiment with, and that is going to be the overlays. We are going to be looking at the overlay actors and the overlay editor settings today. Everything else down here, we've gone over in other videos on the module. All right, so if you want to use overlays, the first thing you need to do is to determine which actors you want to have an overlay for. For this, you click on the Overlay Actors menu, and in here you will find a list of all the actors in your world. You can search this, and it will kind of limit the amount of actors you see, and you have these little bubbles on them. These are going to be the order in which these actors appear. If you tick all of them and then you untick one, this will update. So you can kind of order these around in whatever way you want. Once you have your actors selected, in this case, let's just select the test actor. You can go to the overlay editor. Because this is my development test world, this is already fully set up. You will need to sort of put everything here as you go. The first thing you'll be doing is creating a new overlay up here, which will pop in just a number. And everything in here will be rendered onto the canvas for every actor in your list before everything in here is rendered onto the overlay output for every actor in your list. So that's kind of the order of operations here. Render the first overlay in the list, overlay 0, because in programming we start counting at 0. Do it for the first actor, then the second actor, then the third actor, and so on. And then do the second overlay in the list. Do it for the first actor, the second actor, the third actor. We have a couple of types of overlays we can make here. I've tried to keep these as concise as possible to not duplicate anything where the editor looks the same. The first kind of overlay we have is the plain text overlay. This doesn't mean that the input is plain text. This means that the output is just text. And there's two things that can be in here. You can have an actor value. These are all of the actor values on the Pathfinder 2nd Edition actor that the module was able to find. These are a bit arcane names, but you can usually figure out what this is. This is all very much human readable. The name, for instance, is just the name of the actor, but you can also have just text in here. So I could do this, and this will recognize it as being text and output what I've written there. So I can go, hi, YouTube. But you don't need to do this if the input you're doing is not a valid actor value. It will still print it out. The quotes are just to short-circuit it into not trying to resolve the value from the actor data before rendering out the overlay text. Also, if you want a quotation mark, you can kind of escape it for it to show up. But let's set this back to name and go over to the next one. This is the Font Awesome icon. Foundry uses something called Font Awesome, which is just a library of different icons to render icons. All of the icons you see in Foundry, all of these ones are all Font Awesome icons. You can go into the Font Awesome website and look at the items on offer. Foundry uses Font Awesome Premium, so you can use every icon on the website, even if they are marked as paid. To get them to display, all you want to do is kind of put the icon name in here. This is also, ironically, actor value resolved. If for some reason you have a Font Awesome icon somewhere in an actor, you can fetch it here. But most of the time, this is just intended for plain text input. this can just render out icons. If the text that is put into this element is not a valid icon, it will become weird. So yeah, make sure that whatever you put in here is a valid icon name. The next one is kind of the more interesting variant of this, which is the Boolean AV icon. A Boolean is a base data type that is either true or false. So you want to set this actor value up here to something that is either true or false. Although we are using JavaScript, so empty strings and the number 0 also are false, and any other number and any text that is not empty will result to true. So you can theoretically put any actor value in here if you know what you're doing. Then you can set what icon to be displayed, which is this one, if the value we are looking at is true, and which icon to be displayed if the value we're looking at is false. For various reasons, I'm using the prototype token site enabled setting here. So let me just open up the token. That is this lovely setting. So keep an eye on this icon. If I turn this off and update the token, that will update automatically to an X. And then let me reset that to what it was before. There's another variant of this. If you don't want to display an icon, but you want to display an image, any arbitrary image anywhere in the world, you can do that too by specifying the Boolean AV image component. Then instead of the icon name, you just specify an image URL and it will print out the image. This is lorem ipsum, which is a stock image thing you can use for prototyping images. It will just give you a random image. These don't mean anything. They're just here. Then there's the plain image component. Once again, renders out an image. This one is particularly helpful, though, because actors have an image property. So it can render out someone's profile picture from their actor sheet here. Then you have the multi-icon AV, which is this one right here. What this one doesn't really follow from the name, is it will take two actor values that are numbers. So, like I've done here, for instance, the current HP value and the HP maximum. And what it will do is it will render this icon as many times as the value is, and it will render the second icon after that the second value minus the first value times, which gets you the effect that you see here. This is very useful for HP bars that are a bit more fancy with icons if you want to have something like Zelda-esque going on. So you can see this character has 16 max HP and 5 current HP. So, as expected, you are getting 5 instances of the FA solid FA heart, so the solid fill heart, and you're getting 11 more instances, 16 minus 5, of the FA regular heart, which in case of Font Awesome is just an unfilled heart. Let me set this back to something that's a bit smaller so you can see this one better. That is the next element, the multi-image AV. It's analogous to the multi-icon AV. Just as before, instead of rendering icons, it will render out images. It's a bit hard to see in this example because the images are so small. But you get 5 instances of the first image and then 11 instances of the second image. I hope these are clear enough that they are different. And the final one is the progress bar, which is just a progress bar, which once again takes in the value and the maximum, 2 numbers, just like the multi-icon and multi-image components. Just instead of rendering icons or images, it renders out an HTML progress bar component, which is just a progress bar. You can style this however you want, which brings us to the next part, we have two ways to edit the styling of this render output. The first way, which is not the recommended way, is to use the style editor. This is just here to do quick edits, like, oh, I want all of the color, the font color to be red. You can do this, and then that is not how you set font color. I think it's colon. Yes, and then all of the font gets red. But this isn't really intended to be full styling. What this does is HTML elements have a style attribute that you can set. And this setting will set that attribute on every on the element you're editing. So this is the style attribute of the container that all of these other elements are rendered into. And then this is the style attribute of the container for the individual component. So the reason this isn't recommended is because it's not fine-grained enough for these multi-renders. Because this will set the style property on the container of this thing, you have no way of coloring these hearts differently to these hearts. If you need more control over the CSS styling, what you want to do is to use the OBS browser source custom CSS, which is this section down here. This one might look familiar from the previous video about how to set up the OBS remote functionality, because we are abusing this for communicating the OBS WebSocket login details to the application. But this time we have restyling of the stream page in mind. For the overlays to show up at all, you need to use the stream page. How to set up this correctly is in the base installation tutorial, the first one in this series, which I highly recommend you watch if you have no idea how to set this up so everything works nicely. If you have the stream page rendering out, you can have your components here. They will just be rendered onto this canvas, however you set them. And if you want to style them, you can address their values in here. This is just regular CSS. There's no magic going on here. There's nothing really module specific other than the names of the individual class. Excuse me. Other than the names of the individual classes. So what you want to do is you can either consult the documentation over here and look at the general structure. So there will be an element called overlay. That's the base element. This is rendered as a container of everything else. Then you have the actor and the overlays and the components kind of rendering out. And the other way to get your hands on what you need is to open the dev tools. You can do that by hitting F12, which will open this window right here. And then you can click on this and kind of target any of these components. And then you can see the layout here. So this is kind of the preview element. This one is specific to the editor. But once you get inside the preview element, the structure is identical to what is put out onto the stream page. So you can look at stuff here. This is the container I've mentioned. This one has the class overlay on it. Then you have the actor, the single line overlay, and then each of the individual overlays, which are tagged with a component class. And then what type of component they are. The plain text component renders out as actor val component. This one renders the icon as FA icon component, and so on. You can look at the classes here, and then you can use regular CSS to do any styling you want on these. I will not do a tutorial about this, and I also recommend to not necessarily go to the Discord for this specifically, because CSS is very complicated. If you need styling here, I recommend you to look at CSS resources online, or try your hand at just learning it. If you need something that you can't find an example for. You have one option, which is to look at the CSS share channel on Discord and see if anyone has shared a stream overlay CSS setup that works for you. But I would urge one point of caution here. You should not use CSS to composite your overlays, because there is an easier way of accomplishing this. I will go over to OBS real quick here. Welcome to my OBS. And I will show this source briefly here. I hope this is visible enough. The duplication might make it a bit complicated. But essentially, you can hold Alt on your keyboard and then drag the corner to cut the source without resizing it. And this way, you can, for instance, crop out just the stream chat, which will always have the same size, and then move it around anywhere. And if you want any other element from this source, you can Control-C, Control-V to get a copy of this same source, and then crop it differently to show the overlays. You can crop this down to any overlay. You could crop this to one of the images, and you can enlarge the image however you want. You can enlarge the stream, the game chat, all of that stuff. And you can do all of this in OBS, more or less in camera, without having to really concern yourself with CSS. As long as your setup is made in a way where the elements won't move around on the screen, which you can easily accomplish by setting width and height properties on each of the overlays to kind of constrain them to a specific size. You can use this to do all of the compositing you need in camera. You should also not load images in the overlays that you want to have things composited onto. Unless the image is really something that will change in gameplay, it is a better idea to change it as a source in here, as an image source, this one, and then just select the image you want, move it around in OBS, and put the values onto that image. That is a lot easier than trying to wrap your head around CSS just so you can have the overlay completely rendered in OBS the way you want it. It's also a lot more efficient to do it this way, because you only render the entire page once, and then you just duplicate the current frame, kind of like doing a Photoshop collage. So this is a lot more efficient than doing it in OBS, and than doing it in CSS. Well, that will be the tutorial for this. I thank you a lot for watching. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to consult the docs online or to go over to the Discord and ask any questions that you may have. This is the last video in the beginner setup series. I hope this was helpful to you, and I will see you on stream.